How's it going, everyone? Mike the Warhost here, and the wait is finally over. After almost 6 weeks of twiddling my thumbs and tapping my fingers and constantly refreshing tracking pages, my order finally arrived last night while I was at work. So this is my first chance to actually take stock of everything. Okay, so first box, first package, we have a couple of heads. Looks like one for Wild Bill and a hat for someone. Can't quite tell from looking at it. Could be Nate Barringer, could be Rebecca Capelli. A few torsos and whatnot. So yeah, I'm guessing that hat was going to be for Nate Barringer. So you got him right there. And Wild Bill's torso, gun, and a duster. And a few legs as well. These look like they are done really well. I'm not seeing any flat. Well, I'm sorry. There's a little bit of flashing right there. There. Probably can't see it that well because, like I said, it's tiny. I overlooked it the first couple of times I glanced at it. So there's that. Next package we have we have some parts for Miss Grace Myrtle and Calamity Jane as well. Yep. There's Calamity Jane's bits along with legs for Grace. You can kind of see a bit of a mold line right there once my camera focuses. Come on. Okay, yeah. Come on. There we go. Okay. You can't quite make it out because the camera doesn't feel like cooperating at the moment, but there's a tiny little bit right in here. Nothing too serious, though. All that. And last few sprues, we have the Capelli sisters. Got Rebecca's head and torso here, along with most of Missy. And the last few bits as well. I mean, that hat is most likely for Rebecca. It'll be interesting to see if there's any significant differences in the Capelli sisters models and Grace as well. I had those three already from the first edition. So I'll be able to do a quick comparison once they're built up and painted to see how they look side to side. All right. In that case, I'm gonna go ahead and get all of these built up and then show you what they look like when they're done. Okay, so here we have the Ranger Showboat Posse, fully assembled and ready to go. Putting this kit together, for the most part, was pretty easy. There were a couple of little hiccups here and there. Biggest one that I ran into was with Miss Calamity Jane right here. She has a fairly specific build order, I found the hard way. If you look on the actual crate right there, you see that little indentation? That's where the butt of her rifle is actually supposed to go. I didn't realize that until after I had already had Jane assembled and glued to the base. So if you're going to be building her, I would highly recommend using a bit of blue tack first to try to or doing some dry fitting to figure out exactly how you want her on there. Otherwise, you're going to end up having to add a bit of extra glue to the rifle there to make sure it stays in place and doesn't wobble around, which will put a bit more extra stress on that particular bit. It could end up warping and getting bent in the future. Other than that, this went together pretty well. You see there's a little bit of flashing there on her calf, some on her foot, but overall the quality of the actual miniature and the cast is quite high. You just have, like I said, you just have to have a bit of care when getting her put together to make sure she goes together the way she's supposed to. Here we have Mr. Nate Behringer, who will require a bit of extra gap filler because of his shoulder right there. Yeah, that was a goof on my part. I've always had trouble with resin miniatures holding rifles sort of like this. It's always a real pain to try to get everything to line up properly because you have to worry, okay, did I clean any remaining sprue bit from the gate properly? Did I take off too much? Did any of the pieces warp at any point? So that's always been tricky for me. As far as mold lines go, there's really not very many here. You see the one right there on his shirt and going down his leg. There's a decent bit of flashing. Well, decent bit for Wild West Exodus, I should say. Yeah, there's him. Mr. Wild Bill himself. Again, tiny bit of gap filling here and there. A little bit of flashing on his hat. But overall, he went together really well. I had no problems with him. See some mold lines there along the feet and the pants, but nothing too major. Now for Missy Capelli. Again, little bits of flashing here and there. If you have the first edition miniature, you'll notice that she has a pair of goggles on her head now, whereas the previous edition did not. So it might be a pretty easy way to tell the difference between this one and the initial run, if you have both of them in your collection, which I do. Here's some mold lines and extra cleanup work there on her leg. If I remember correctly, yeah, there's also quite a bit on the inside of the legs too, and some cleanup there on the back of her launcher. But yeah, beautiful model. And Miss Rebecca, and a little bit of gap filler. I did have some trouble with her. Apparently there was a good amount of mold release agent stuck right in there, so it took quite a bit of work for me to actually get that leg to stay. That was probably the hardest part of the whole build process for this entire box, was just this damn leg didn't want to stay. Yeah, little bits of flashing here and there. Again, minor first edition difference. She has a different hat with the Lawmen badge on it now because she's wearing her goggles, whereas first edition miniature, the goggles were actually on her hat and her eyes were clear. Other than that, exactly the same. And rounding things out, we have Miss Grace Myrtle. She was a little bit finicky, but not as bad as Rebecca was for me. Has some gaps there to fill on her waist, some mold lines going down her legs. Those ones are going to be a bit trickier to clean off, just because there are so many straps on her legs and on almost every Wild West Exodus model. Designers really love all their straps. And another one that one's gonna be tough. A big improvement over the first edition model is, if you look, her gun is finally straight. For anyone who has the first edition Grace Myrtle, you'll know that her rifle bent a lot, and apparently that was the way it was designed, because if you tried to straighten it out, then the rifle wouldn't fit on her arms. So that was something that's always bugged me. I'm glad it got fixed now, and I can't quite tell if that bit right there under her hand is supposed to be for a lever action rifle, or if that's just a bit of flashing. I'll have to go take another look and see. But yeah, there she is. Overall, a couple of tricky portions to get assembled, but still a very high quality setup. I got this box put together in the space of maybe 2 hours, including the initial cleaning that I'd done. I obviously have a bit more to do before I can prime them and get them built. But yeah, there we have Ranger Showboat Posse box assembled. Now let's talk tactics, how to use these guys on the table against your opponent. So what exactly is the best way to use the Ranger Showboat Posse? A lot of that will depend on your preferred playstyle. This posse has 3 separate slots for any units with the Ranger keyword, so you have some flexibility there. If you want a face-heavy force, you can easily do that. If you want to flood the board with groups of Ranger hands to hold objectives, that's possible too. Or if you want to bring as many mounted units as you can afford, both in points and money, you can do that too. The posse list is a bit more restrictive than you'd think at first glance though. Not a single slot on the card lets you bring more than 1 unit. Everything is either a single unit or a choice between 2 unit types, whereas most of the posses will have at least 1 and/or slot available. This means you'll need to think very carefully about what you want to bring. If you want to build a tournament-sized list using what comes in the posse box, my personal recommendation would be to bring a second, smaller posse to fill in the remaining points. The Ranger Showboat Posse box comes in at 940 points, leaving you with 560 points to play with. If I were making a list using this posse box as a base, I would bring Morgan Earp and a trio of Gatling gun-equipped K9 gun dogs, along with a pair of booby traps for both bosses. That brings you up to 1490 points, which is as close as you're going to get. This list will let you take advantage of the Ranger Showboat Posse bonus, all units gain the elite keyword, as well as some mobile firepower without that pesky task rule. Rather than run 1 full slot of 3 dogs, I'd do 3 slots of 1 dog each to provide maximum flexibility in positioning. Alternatively, you could also swap out a gun dog for a unit of civilians to try to get an extra victory point at the end of the game. This list won't be a great deal of help if you come across any vehicles, however, as the sole source of any piercing above -2 is Missy Capelli, who can't move and shoot in the same activation. It's also going to make her a pretty big target, so you're going to have to be careful with her. Odds are your opponent would be too concerned about 3 highly mobile Gatling guns to notice. What this list does have on its side, though, is Fortune. The Ranger Showboat Posse comes in with a whopping 6 Fortune in the box, and adding in Morgan Earp's 3 Fortune for his gun dogs means you'll have plenty to go around. Just remember that largesse can only be used by units in the same posse, so don't try to pull any of Morgan's Fortune to use on one of the Capelli sisters.
If I were making a tournament list without the restriction of using the entire box, here's what I'd do. Take advantage of Wild Bill's report special rule to bring a unit of 3 civilians along with a single booby trap. Slot 1 goes to Miss Grace Myrtle to focus on taking advantage of Headhunter to keep her fortune topped off. Slot 2 goes to James McLean to provide some close range support with Gunfighter. Slot 3 gets 5 Ranger Minutemen with a single Gatling gun to camp objectives and set up fire lanes. Slot 4 goes to a trio of Ranger Interceptors to act as a quick reaction force if needed, or to simply harass the enemy if not. Slot 5 goes to Nate Behringer and another unit of 3 civilians to quickly get some of the hands moving up the table, and to assist in locking down any avenues of approach with the smoke grenades and juiced launcher. The last slot is taken up by a unit of 5 veteran Rangers with another Gatling gun to do the same thing as the other hands unit. Set up shop near an objective, hunker down, and shred anything that gets too close to bits. This leaves you with a decent amount of options to handle nearly anything your opponent can throw at you short of vehicles like a Rolling Thunder or a Pillar of Light. The Ranger Interceptors are going to be your hardest hitting unit with 6 piercing -3 shots per shoot action. You'll have the same amount of fortune available as the first list for this posse, but with one more unit to spread it around can make it a bit trickier to manage. But if you utilize Grace's Headhunter rule effectively, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. So there you have it, the Ranger Showboat posse in a nutshell. Plenty of available power that needs to be managed efficiently in order to get the best results. It's not as forgiving as some posses, but the additional challenge can be rewarding. Well, that's going to do it for me today. I'm glad I was finally able to get this one completed after plenty of hiccups and delays and recording and re-recording and re-recording and re-recording. Stay tuned for more unboxings and painting tutorials in the near future, along with, fingers crossed, a custom holiday scenario and battle reports. Take care, everyone.